In the quest to complete the requirements from our customer, we are now going to move on to calculating the revenues. We are first going to write the function in Fox and then in later chapters redefine the calculation by writing it in an AMDP. In this chapter, we will look at a few new statements in Fox, and we will look at info-object attribute lookups, accessing the value of a characteristic in a block, conditional statements, and referencing characteristics in the aggregation level not specific to the block value. Our customers ask for the following. Prices can only be planned on a higher level. For example, we cannot plan prices on material customer level, only material group and customer. In some instances, we may have prices applied to material within a material group, while material group and customer specific prices may exist. Planned prices are also valid for a full year, and no periodic price planning is required. Planned revenues will be a simple quantity times price calculation, and the results will be written to a derived GL account. From this requirement, we need to do a few things with the code. We have a sequence in which prices must be determined. First, we check if a material group and customer-specific price exist. If not, we apply the material group price. We need to write the results of the calculation against the GL account. The GL account is derived from the account assignment of the customer. From this requirement, we need to do a few things within the code. We have a sequence in which the prices must be determined. First, we check if a material group and customer-specific price exist. If not, we add the material group price. And we need to write the results of the calculation against the GL account. The GL account is derived from the account assignment of the customer. Since we are using Fox, we have a few issues to deal with. In our case, we have two separate sequences to check, one for material group and one for customer. Now let's look at the data more carefully. So if we have a volumes record, for example below for material FG129, and for two customers, one for customer 1 and one for customer 5, we can see that a customer-specific price exists for customer 1, in which case we will take access sequence 305 and the price of 99. In the case of customer 5, no specific price exists. And in this case, we will take the 125 from access sequence A304 for the material group price. The second issue is regarding the GL account. The info object that we must use to derive the GL account is zero account assignment, but it is an attribute of zero cost sales, the sales view of the customer master. We cannot directly access the info object, and it is not in our ADSO, and we don't want to add it at this point, since we do not have all the info objects that is compounded with it. Further, a mapping from the customer account assignment group to the GL account is maintained in table Z-actor. A further limitation of Fox is that we cannot read data from a Z table. These two issues with determining the correct account forces us to hard code the value. This further restricts the scalability of the solution. Now let's look at some of the new statements we're going to cover. The first is info object attribute lookup. So if we want to look up the material group of a material, we specify ATRV, the attribute we want to look up, and then the info object that contains that attribute. And we can assign this to a variable we have declared. Next, we can access the value of a characteristic in a block. Say, for example, the fields to be changed is account, chart of accounts, currency, info provider, and unit. We can still access the value of material in the block by specifying the statement objv and a pair of brackets. So we can assign that to an info object, and that info object must be typed to zero material, so the object that's in the block. Next is conditional statements, and that is the if statement. And the if statement has the following syntax: if followed by an expression and a statement, followed by several else if statements, an else statement, and then an int if statement. So in our case, we're going to say if the price of the previous access sequence is 0, we're going to execute this statement followed by the int if. Next, we're going to look at referencing characteristics in the aggregation level, not specific to the block value. This statement is very useful when we're trying to do a select from an involved info provider, but the value we want to use is not a block characteristic value. We can see this quite clearly when looking at our composite provider. So I've selected customer hash 1 for material group L001 2019 version 100, value type 20. Now if I sort the records, we're going to loop through our volumes records by customer material. However, prices are either on material level or material customer level. So it might be that our material price is blank or even the customer is blank. And we can reference that record by piping it and specifying that the customer and the material is hash. And then, of course, because price is on fiscal year level, we also specify a hash for fiscal year period. Now let's move on to the planning function. The planning function we're going to create is TSLP1.4PF1 of type formula, and the fields to be changed is account, chart of accounts, currency, info provider, and the unit of measure. The reason the unit of measure is in here because the volumes is our starting point, and the unit of measure and quantity does not appear in our target info provider, and the unit will be made unassigned. So under parameters, we simply paste the code in as supplied by the configuration guide. So let's go through some of the statements. We can see that it is basically using all the statements we've used to date. For example, getting the material from the block. Then we're getting base unit of measure from the material as well as the material group. From the sales org, we're getting the currency to write the evaluated revenue record. Then we get the quantity and applying the pricing sequence. First, we look at A3 of 5, and if no price is found, we look at A3 of 4. Then revenue is simply price times quantity, and in this case, we're hard coding the account as well as the chart of account. Now let's look at the result of our planning function by executing a planning sequence. I'm executing it for one period only to keep the running times manageable. And let execute in trace mode. So you can see 65 records has been generated, and let's look at one of them. So for customer 1. And here we can see that a new record has been created with the account number as well as the total revenue value. In this chapter, we took Fox a little further by calculating revenue. However, the Fox code is not scalable. By moving the code to SQL, we can improve the solution. This is the topic of the next chapter. In the previous chapter, we calculated revenue using Fox. However, it does not provide us with a very scalable solution. In this chapter, we will convert the Fox into an AMDP and calculate the revenue using SQL. The SQL code performed the same calculations as Fox, but with the benefit of it being scalable, and it does not need to be adjusted as often as the Fox code for small changes to application. For example, new account and account groups being added to the mapping table. The SQL will be able to handle these changes as they arise. There are a